The rain hammered against the diner windows in sheets so thick the streetlights outside blurred into watercolor smudges. Darnell Williams moved between tables with practiced efficiency, balancing 3 plates along his left forearm, while his right hand carried a coffee pot that had gone lukewarm 20 minutes ago. The clock above the kitchen door read 9:47 p.m., which meant 13 minutes until his shift ended, 13 minutes until he could drive home through streets that would be empty except for the ghosts of better days. Golden Oak Diner occupied a corner lot where the respectable part of town gave way to something harder, where the facades crumbled and the neon signs flickered with missing letters. The building itself had been standing since 1962, its chrome exterior dulled by decades of exhaust fumes and neglect. Inside, red vinyl booths lined the windows, their cushions patched with duct tape that no one bothered to hide anymore. The counter ran the length of the back wall, 15 stools bolted to the floor, most of them occupied on a Friday night by people who had nowhere else to be. Darnell set down the plates in front of Frank Holloway, a long-haul trucker who had been coming here for as long as Darnell had been working the night shift. Frank's face was weathered leather, his hands scarred from years of wrestling cargo straps and loading docks. He wore the same red flannel shirt every Friday, the same cat diesel power cap pushed back on his head. Meatloaf special extra gravy. Coffee's on the house tonight, Frank. You've been nursing that same cup for 2 hours. Frank grunted his thanks without looking up from his plate. The television mounted in the corner was playing the 11 o'clock news on mute, images of politicians and weather maps flickering across the screen. Darnell moved to the next table where Jerome stood behind the counter scraping down the grill with methodical strokes that spoke of muscle memory built over decades. Jerome was 53 years old and had worked kitchen jobs since he was 16, his dark skin glistening with steam and sweat, his expression perpetually set in a mask of professional detachment. How many more tonight? Just the one in booth 7. College kid. Been here since 6. Darnell glanced over at booth 7 where Brittany Chen hunched over a nursing textbook, her black hair falling forward to hide her face. She was 19, maybe 20, working her way through the community college program, 1 credit at a time. Her coffee cup sat empty beside a plate that held nothing but crumbs from the cheapest item on the menu, a side of toast that cost $2. Darnell had seen her count out quarters more than once, her face flushing red when she came up short, her hands shaking as she checked her pockets again. He walked over with a coffee pot and refilled her cup without asking. She looked up startled, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that came from working 2 jobs and still falling behind. On the house. You've been studying hard. I can pay. I have money. Save it for your textbooks. Those things cost more than dinner. Her throat worked as she swallowed back whatever she was going to say. When Darnell brought her check 10 minutes later, he had already crossed out the total and written 0 in black ink. She stared at it for a long moment, her eyes going bright with tears she refused to let fall. Darnell, I can't keep letting you do this. Then pay it forward someday. Help someone else when you're making nurse money. He walked away before she could argue, before she could see that his own wallet held $47 and a maxed-out credit card, before she could understand that giving away $2 worth of toast made him feel like he still controlled something in a world that had taken everything else. The kitchen door swung open and Earl Patterson emerged, the diner's owner and a man who had been running this place since before Darnell was born. Earl was 68 with a horseshoe of white hair around a liver-spotted scalp, his belly pressing against a button-down shirt that had once been white but had faded to gray. Slow night. You can probably cut out early if you want. I'm good until 10. Don't want to short you on hours. Earl clapped him on the shoulder with a heavy hand. You're a good man, Darnell. Don't let anyone tell you different. The words landed heavier than Earl probably intended. Darnell had been hearing variations of that phrase for 5 years now, ever since Michelle died and he traded his software engineering job for night shifts at a diner. Good man, doing the right thing. So brave. As if martyrdom made the electricity bill disappear, as if nobility paid for Maya's school supplies, as if being good was enough when the world demanded so much more than goodness. His phone buzzed in his pocket with a distinctive pattern that made his chest tighten. Maya. He held up a finger to Earl and pushed through the kitchen door into the narrow hallway that led to the employee bathroom. The fluorescent light overhead flickered and hummed, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. He answered on the second ring. Hey, sweetheart. Daddy, I miss you. Her voice was small and sleepy, barely above a whisper. He could picture her in her bedroom, the one they shared in their cramped apartment, surrounded by the stuffed animals she had collected over 7 years of birthdays and Christmases. She would be lying in bed with her stuffed rabbit, the one Michelle had given her on her second birthday, clutching it against her chest like it could fill the space where a mother should be. I miss you too, baby. When are you coming home? Not until late, but Mrs. Robinson is right next door. If you need anything, remember I know. I just wanted to say goodnight. Something cracked open inside his chest, the same fissure that opened every time he heard her voice on the phone instead of in person, every time he missed bedtime, because someone had to earn money and he was the only someone left. Michelle used to say he was the best father she knew, that Maya was lucky to have him, but Michelle had never seen him like this, working until midnight while their daughter fell asleep alone. He wondered what she would say now, what she would think of the choices he had made, the life he had given their child. Good night, Maya. I love you so much. Love you too, Daddy. The line went dead and Darnell stood there in the hallway staring at the phone screen until it went dark. 5 years. 5 years of this. 5 years of missing school plays and parent-teacher conferences, of hearing about her day secondhand from Mrs. Robinson, of being present for everything that didn't matter and absent for everything that did. He had sacrificed his career, his income, his entire future, also he could be there during the daylight hours, so Maya would never wake up alone. And still, it was not enough. It would never be enough. When he pushed back through the kitchen door, Jerome was plating the last order of the night. Darnell took it to Frank, who had moved on to cherry pie, his third cup of coffee steaming in front of him. The television was showing a commercial for car insurance. A happy family driving through sunshine. Everyone smiling like money was something that grew on trees instead of something you bled for. "You doing okay, kid?" Jerome's voice cut through his thoughts. Darnell realized he had been standing motionless in the middle of the diner holding an empty coffee pot. He blinked and set it down on the counter. "Yeah, just tired. You're always tired. When's the last time you took a day off? Can't remember." "That's not healthy, man. You're going to burn out." "Burning out is a luxury. I'll rest when Maya's grown." Jerome shook his head but did not argue. They had known each other for 5 years now, long enough to understand that some conversations were pointless, that some people were trapped in their choices like insects in amber, unable to move forward or back, frozen in a moment that would define the rest of their lives. That was when Darnell noticed the woman in booth 12. She sat in the far corner where the fluorescent lights barely reached a pocket of shadow that most customers avoided because it felt too isolated, too exposed. But this woman sat there like she owned it, her posture straight, her hands folded on the table in front of her. She wore a black suit that looked like it had been tailored specifically for her body, the kind of garment that cost more money than Darnell made in a month. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. On the seat beside her sat a handbag made of leather so fine it seemed to glow even in the dim light. Darnell had been working here for 5 years, and he could count on one hand the number of times someone in a suit like that had walked through the door. Golden Oak Diner was not the kind of place that attracted wealth. It attracted necessity, desperation, the kind of people who measured their lives in coffee refills and stretched a single meal across 3 hours, because going home meant facing whatever waited there. He approached her table with the coffee pot, suddenly aware of how worn his uniform was, how the elbows had gone thin from too many washings, how the name tag was crooked because one of the pins had broken off months ago. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made him want to step back. "Can I warm that up for you, ma'am?" Her coffee cup was still full, the pie now in front of her untouched, except for a single bite taken from the corner. She had been sitting there for over an hour, he realized. He had been so caught up in his own thoughts, his own exhaustion, that he had not noticed her arrive. That bothered him more than it should have. He prided himself on noticing things, on remembering names and faces, on seeing people, when everyone else looked through them. "It's fine." Her voice was smooth and controlled, the kind of voice that belonged in boardrooms and corner offices, delivering verdicts that changed lives with surgical precision. She looked back down at her cup, dismissing him, and Darnell retreated to the counter where Jerome was watching him with raised eyebrows. "Who's that?" "No idea. Been here about an hour. Rich people slumming it. Probably read some article about authentic dining experiences." Darnell glanced back at the woman. She was not looking at her phone, not reading a book, not doing anything except sitting and watching. Her gaze moved slowly around the diner, taking in every detail, every person with the focus of someone conducting surveillance. When her eyes landed on him, he felt exposed, like she could see through the uniform and the smile and the carefully constructed persona he wore to get through each shift. Frank was getting louder at the counter, telling a story about a blizzard in Montana, his hands gesturing wildly as he described 18-wheelers jackknifed across the interstate. Darnell had heard this story twice before, but he listened anyway, nodding in the right places because that was what you did. You listened. You made people feel seen. The woman in booth 12 watched all of it. At 10:30, she stood and walked to the counter. Up close, Darnell could see that she was maybe 50, maybe younger, with the kind of ageless quality that money bought. Her suit was Armani. He noticed, recognizing the label from the days when he still worked downtown, when he still wore button-downs and slacks and thought about things like brands. Her watch was platinum elegant and understated, the kind that cost as much as a used car. Just the coffee and pie. Yes, the total came to $8.50. She handed him a credit card without looking at it, a black American Express that caught the light. He ran it through the reader, the machine beeping its approval, and handed her the receipt to sign. She signed it with a fountain pen she pulled from her purse, her handwriting elegant and precise, then left the merchant copy on the counter. When Darnell looked down at the tip line, it was blank. Zero. The disappointment settled in his stomach like a stone, familiar and expected. Rich people rarely tipped well. They thought the meal itself was payment enough, that their presence was a gift bestowed upon establishments like this. He had learned long ago not to expect anything, not to hope for generosity from people who measured their wealth in numbers too large to comprehend. But still, every time some small part of him hoped, every time he was wrong. The woman walked out into the rain without a word, without a glance back, leaving nothing behind except the faint scent of expensive perfume and the blank tip line on a receipt. Darnell folded it and slipped it into his apron pocket. Earl was closing out the register, counting bills with practiced efficiency. Jerome had finished cleaning the kitchen and was untying his apron. Brittany had packed up her textbooks and was heading for the door, mouthing "thank you" one more time before disappearing into the night. Frank had settled his bill and was pulling on his jacket, preparing for another long drive through states that all looked the same in the dark. Darnell moved to clear the woman's table, stacking the plate and cup on his tray. That was when he saw the envelope. It sat beneath the edge of the plate, pristine white, against the scratched formica, folded once with text written on the outside in handwriting that matched the signature on the receipt. For the waiter who remembers names. His hands were shaking as he picked it up. The envelope was thick, expensive paper stock, the kind that came from a stationery store instead of an office supply warehouse. He opened it carefully and pulled out a single sheet of paper and a business card. The paper read, "I need to see you. This is not charity. This is a proposal. Come into Sterling Industries tomorrow at 10 odd in the morning. Ask for Catherine Sterling. Don't ignore this." The business card was heavy, embossed lettering that stood out from the surface. Catherine Sterling, CEO, Sterling Industries. A phone number, an address downtown in the financial district where buildings touched the sky and security guards kept people like him out. Darnell knew that name. Everyone knew that name. Catherine Sterling had been in Forbes magazine, in the Wall Street Journal, in every business publication that existed. She had started her company in a garage 20 years ago and built it into something worth billions. She sat on boards, advised presidents, moved through the world with a kind of power that most people could not even imagine. And she had just spent an hour sitting in his diner, watching him leaving $0 in tips and telling him to come see her tomorrow morning. His first thought was that it was a prank, some elaborate joke orchestrated by someone with too much time and money. His second thought was that it was a scam, that he would show up at that address and find an empty office, or worse, that he would be robbed or assaulted or used in some way he could not predict. Rich people did not leave notes for waiters. Rich people did not care what happened after they walked out the door. But something about the way she had watched him, the way her eyes had tracked every movement, every interaction, felt intentional. Like she had been studying him, testing him, measuring him against some invisible standard. He slipped the note and card into his pocket and finished clearing the table. Earl had turned off most of the lights, leaving only the security bulbs burning. Jerome had already left through the back door. Frank's truck rumbled to life in the parking lot, its engine coughing before settling into a steady growl. Darnell clocked out at 10:47, 17 minutes late, and walked to his car parked in the employees section behind the dumpsters. It was a 2009 Honda Accord with rust eating through the wheel wells and a passenger door that stuck when it rained. He had bought it for $3,000 cash 6 months after Michelle died when his decent car got repossessed because he had missed 4 payments while drowning in hospital bills and funeral costs. The drive home took 15 minutes through streets that were slick with rain. Most of the businesses were closed, their windows dark, their parking lots empty. He passed the grocery store where he shopped every Sunday, stretching $70 across 7 days of meals. He passed Maya's school, a small private institution that cost $1,200 per semester because the public school in their district had failing test scores and a reputation for violence. He passed the apartment complex where they lived, a 2-story brick building from the 1970s with peeling paint and a parking lot full of potholes. The apartment was on the second floor, unit 2C, 1 bedroom, that he and Maya shared. He had given her the bed and he slept on a pull-out couch in the living room that had come with the place, its springs poking through the thin mattress. When he unlocked the door and stepped inside, the first thing he saw was the nightlight glowing from the bedroom doorway, a small yellow star that Maya had picked out herself. He checked on her first. She was asleep, curled around her stuffed rabbit, her dark curls spread across the pillow like a halo. Her face was peaceful in sleep, innocent in a way that made his chest hurt. She was 7 years old and she had already learned not to ask for things they could not afford, had already learned to accept no as the default answer to every question. She measured her life in small victories, in moments when the answer was yes instead of no. And every time Darnell looked at her, Michelle saw the woman who had worked doubles at the hospital, who had come home exhausted and still found energy to play with their daughter, who had said the night before she died, "Give her the life I couldn't give her." He had been trying. God, he had been trying. But trying was not the same as succeeding. His phone buzzed with an email notification and he pulled it out, squinting at the screen. The sender was Maya's school. The subject line read, "Important update on tuition." He opened it and read it twice to make sure he understood. Next semester's tuition was increasing from $1,200 to $2,500. The school was implementing a new enhanced learning program, upgraded technology, expanded curriculum, smaller class sizes. All very impressive, all very expensive. The email explained that families experiencing financial hardship could apply for assistance, but the language was careful and cold, designed to discourage as many people as possible from actually asking for help. Darnell sat down on the couch and stared at the wall where Michelle's photograph hung in a cheap frame. She was laughing in the picture, her head thrown back, her hands holding Maya, who was maybe 2 years old. It had been taken at a park on a Sunday afternoon, one of the rare days when they had both been off work at the same time, when they could pretend that life was something other than an endless marathon toward an invisible finish line. $2,500. He checked his bank account on his phone. $340. After rent, utilities, groceries, and gas, he would have maybe $20 left before the next paycheck. And that paycheck would not cover the tuition increase either. Neither would the one after that. He could pick up more shifts, could work 7 days a week instead of 6, could sleep even less, see Maya even less, but the math still would not work. The numbers were too large, the gap too wide. He pulled the note from his pocket and read it again in the dim light from the kitchen. Catherine Sterling, Sterling Industries, 10 o'clock in the morning. This is not charity. This is a proposal. What kind of proposal? What could a billionaire possibly want from him? He thought about ignoring it, throwing the note away, pretending it had never happened. Rich people did not help poor people without wanting something in return. That was how the world worked. He had learned that lesson over and over in the 5 years since Michelle died, had learned that assistance always came with strings attached, that charity was just another word for debt. But then he thought about Maya, about the school email, about the $2,500 that might as well have been $25 million. If there was even a 1% chance this could help her, could he really walk away? He lay down on the pull-out couch, but sleep would not come. The springs dug into his back and his mind spun through scenarios, each one worse than the last. Catherine Sterling wanted a cook, a driver, a gardener. She wanted someone to humiliate, to parade in front of her rich friends as evidence of her generosity. She wanted something darker, something criminal, something that would destroy whatever was left of his dignity. Or maybe she wanted nothing. Maybe this was all a mistake, a wrong number, a case of mistaken identity. Maybe he would show up tomorrow and find out that the note had been meant for someone else, that he had built this up in his mind into something it was not. At 6 in the morning, Maya crawled into bed beside him, her small body warm against his side. Her hair was a mess of beautiful coils, and her eyes were still half closed. "Daddy, did you sleep well?" He lied. "I did, sweetheart. I had a dream about Mommy. She said she was proud of us." His throat closed and he pulled her closer, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, the one that cost $2 at the drugstore and smelled like artificial strawberries. "She is, baby. I promise she is." "Are you going to work today?" "Not until tonight. We have the whole day." She smiled and closed her eyes again, pressing her face against his chest. He held her and stared at the ceiling and made his decision. He would go to Sterling Industries. Not because he believed in miracles, not because he thought a billionaire would save him, but because he needed to know what she wanted, why she had sat in that diner for an hour, why she had watched him, why she had left that note. And maybe, just maybe, because refusing to try felt like giving up, and he had promised Michelle he would never do that. The building was 40 stories of glass and steel, reflecting clouds and sky in its mirrored surface. Darnell stood on the sidewalk across the street for 10 minutes, watching people flow in and out of the revolving doors. They all looked the same: men in dark suits, women in designer dresses, everyone carrying briefcases or leather bags, everyone moving with purpose and confidence. He looked down at his own suit, the one from his wedding 7 years ago, and saw how the shoulders had gone tight, how the pants were too short, how the fabric had faded from black to gray. He crossed the street during a gap in traffic and pushed through the revolving door into a lobby that made him feel like he had stepped into another world. The floors were polished marble white with gray veins that looked like rivers. The walls were floor-to-ceiling windows that let in so much natural light it felt like being outside. A reception desk curved across the back of the lobby, made from dark wood that gleamed, staffed by a woman in her 30s, wearing a headset and a smile that was professional and distant. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes flickered over his suit, his face making judgments in the space of a heartbeat. He had seen that look before in department stores and car dealerships and doctors' offices. That look that said, "You don't belong here." "I'm here to see Catherine Sterling." Her smile did not change, but something shifted in her eyes, a calculation, an assessment. "Do you have an appointment?" "She asked me to come. My name is Darnell Williams." The receptionist picked up her phone and murmured something he could not hear. She listened, her expression unchanging, then hung up and looked at him with something that might have been surprise. 38th floor, the elevator on the left. He rode up alone, watching the numbers climb. The elevator was silent except for the faint hum of machinery, its walls mirrored so he could see himself from every angle. A black man in an ill-fitting suit, out of place, out of his depth, about to walk into something he did not understand. The doors opened onto a hallway of glass and dark wood with offices lining both sides. Through the glass walls, he could see people at desks typing on computers that looked like they cost more than his rent, talking on phones, moving through their days with the confidence of people who had never worried about money. A young man in an expensive suit met him immediately, appearing from one of the offices with the efficiency of someone who had been waiting. "Mr. Williams, right this way." They walked past conference rooms with views that stretched to the horizon, past break rooms that looked like luxury apartments, past everything that represented the life Darnell had once thought he would have. When he worked downtown, when he wrote code and went to meetings and thought about things like career trajectories, he had imagined ending up in a place like this. Not as a visitor, not as someone being escorted like he might steal something, but as someone who belonged. The assistant stopped at a set of double doors at the end of the hall and knocked twice before opening them. "Mr. Williams is here." Catherine Sterling stood behind a desk that could have fit his entire apartment. The office was massive and minimal, all clean lines and natural light. Windows ran from floor to ceiling, overlooking the city like a kingdom spread out below. She wore a different suit today, charcoal gray, that made her look even more severe, even more untouchable. Her hair was still pulled back, but softer somehow, letting a few strands frame her face. "Thank you, Michael." The assistant nodded and left, closing the doors behind him with a soft click. Darnell stood there, suddenly aware of how loud his breathing sounded, how his palms were sweating, how every instinct was screaming at him to turn around and leave before this got worse. "Please sit." Catherine gestured to the chairs across from her desk. They were leather modern, the kind that probably cost more than his car. He sat and the chair was more comfortable than anything he owned. She did not sit immediately. Instead, she walked to a small table near the window where a coffee maker sat, the expensive kind that ground beans fresh. Coffee. Sure, she made 2 cups in silence, the machine humming and clicking through its routine. She brought them both to the desk and sat across from him, setting 1 cup within his reach. The coffee smelled expensive, rich and dark with notes of chocolate. He wrapped his hands around the cup for something to do with him, for something to anchor himself. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. With all respect, Miss Sterling, why am I here and why the 0 tip? She took a sip of her coffee, then set it down carefully on a coaster. The tip was a test. I needed to see how you'd react to being overlooked. Something hot and angry flared in his chest. You tested me like some kind of experiment, Em. Her voice did not waver, did not apologize. And you passed. You didn't curse me, didn't complain to your coworkers, didn't even frown. You just said thank you and wished me a good night. Darnell stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. The sound was too loud in the quiet office. I don't know what kind of game this is, but I'm not interested. It's not a game. Sit down, please. He stayed standing, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I came here because I thought maybe you needed something, that maybe this was real. But you're just bored. You wanted to see what the poor waiter would do. I need someone who treats people with dignity, regardless of their status. Catherine stood as well, meeting his eyes across the desk. I've been looking for months. I watched you for an hour in that diner. The way you handled the drunk driver, the college girl who couldn't pay the phone call with your daughter. You were kind when no one was watching. That's rare. So you insult me to prove a point. I test you to make sure you're real. She walked around the desk closer now, and he could see that her eyes were darker than he had thought, almost black and tense with focus. I'm offering you a job. Community outreach manager for a project I'm launching. $75,000 a year, full benefits, and a scholarship for your daughter at one of the best private schools in the state. The number hit him like a physical blow. $75,000. He'd made 23 working 60 hours a week. What do you want from me? His voice came out quieter than he meant. I'm just a waiter. I don't have a degree in community outreach. I don't have connections. What could I possibly do for you? You've been there. Catherine returned to her desk and picked up a folder thick with documents. You know what it's like to work 2 jobs and still come up short, to smile at people who don't see you, to make choices no one should have to make. I need someone who won't treat struggling families like charity cases, someone who will see them as people. She handed him the folder and he opened it slowly, his hands still shaking. Inside were documents, spreadsheets, photographs. The header on the first page read Second Chances Initiative. He read through it, flipping pages, taking in numbers that seemed impossible. A program for single parents in difficult circumstances. Job training, placement assistance, childcare, support, educational grants for their children. The budget was in the millions, the scope massive, the ambition staggering. You want me to run this, I want you to help build it, to make sure it actually helps people instead of just making me feel good. She sat back down and folded her hands on the desk. You have 3 days to think about it. If you say yes, you start in 2 weeks. This is too much. There has to be a catch. The catch is that you'll work harder than you've ever worked, that you'll carry the weight of knowing that families are depending on you, that you'll have to make decisions that affect real lives. She met his eyes again. If that sounds easy, then you're not the right person. He wanted to say yes. God, he wanted to say yes. Maya's school bill, the overdue electric, the car that needed new brakes, the constant pressure of never having enough. $75,000 would change everything, but nothing was free. Not like this, not from people like her. He had learned that lesson too many times, had seen too many traps disguised as opportunities. I need to think about it. 3 days. You have my number. He left the folder on her desk and walked out. His legs felt unsteady, his vision blurred at the edges. He made it to the elevator before his hands started shaking in earnest. He rode down alone, watching his reflection in the mirrored walls. A black man in an ill-fitting suit, walking away from $75,000 because he was too afraid to believe it could be real. The lobby was crowded now, mid-morning rush, people flowing in and out with the confidence of those who belonged. Darnell pushed through the revolving door and stood on the sidewalk breathing hard, trying to understand what had just happened. The city moved around him, oblivious and indifferent. Cars honked. People talked on phones. The world continued as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. Someone had looked at him and seen potential instead of problems. Someone had offered him a way out of the hole he had been digging for 5 years. And he had walked away because he was too afraid to believe. He drove home in a daze, barely aware of the traffic, of the stoplights, of the turns he made automatically. When he parked in his usual spot, when he climbed the stairs to Unit 2C, when he unlocked the door and stepped inside, Maya was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. Mrs. Robinson sat beside her, helping with a math worksheet. The older woman looked up and smiled. "You're home early. Everything okay?" "Yeah, I just had something to take care of." Mrs. Robinson stood and gathered her things, a worn purse and a cardigan. Maya barely glanced up from her worksheet, her tongue poking out between her teeth as she concentrated. Darnell walked Mrs. Robinson to the door, thanked her, and closed it behind her. Then he stood in his living room and looked at his daughter and felt the weight of every decision he had ever made pressed down on his shoulders. Maya looked up and smiled. "Daddy, can you help me with this problem? I don't understand subtraction with borrowing." He sat down beside her and looked at the worksheet. The problem was simple elementary mathematics that he could solve in his sleep. But watching Maya struggle with it, watching her erase and try again, watching her determination to figure it out on her own, he saw Michelle. Saw the way she had approached every obstacle with that same stubborn resolve, that same refusal to give up even when giving up would have been easier. "Let's work through it together." They spent the afternoon on homework, then made dinner from whatever was in the refrigerator. Pasta with butter and garlic, no sauce because sauce cost extra. Maya chatted about her day, about her friend Emma, who had brought cookies to school about the science project they were starting next week on the solar system. Darnell listened and nodded and tried not to think about Catherine Sterling, about $75,000, about the choice that was eating him alive from the inside out. After Maya went to bed, he sat at his laptop and typed Catherine Sterling's name into Google. Pages of results loaded instantly, articles about her, company interviews about her philanthropy, a Forbes profile from 2 years ago that called her one of the most powerful self-made women in America. He clicked through them, reading everything he could find, looking for something that would tell him who she really was, what she really wanted. Most of it was what he expected. She had started her company in her garage, built it into something worth billions, revolutionized the tech industry with innovations that Darnell did not fully understand. She sat on boards, advised politicians, donated millions to causes ranging from education to environmental protection. She was divorced, no children, lived in a penthouse downtown that had been featured in Architectural Digest. She collected art, ran marathons, spoke 4 languages. She was everything he was not: powerful, wealthy, successful beyond measure. But then he found an older article buried several pages deep in the search results. It was from a local newspaper dated 2010 with a headline that made him stop scrolling. "From waitress to boardroom. Catherine Sterling credits late mother's work ethic." He read it twice. The article mentioned that Catherine's mother, Dorothy Sterling, had worked as a waitress for over 20 years, raising her daughter alone after her husband died in a construction accident. Dorothy had worked 2 jobs most of her life, sometimes 3, sacrificing everything to put Catherine through school. The article quoted Catherine saying, "My mother taught me that dignity isn't about what you do, it's about how you do it. She treated every customer with respect, remembered their names, cared about their lives. She made minimum wage, but she was richer than anyone I've ever known." Dorothy Sterling had died in 2018. The article did not say how, only that she had passed after a long illness. There was a photograph at the bottom of the page, grainy and small, showing Dorothy in her waitress uniform, smiling at the camera. She looked tired but happy, her eyes bright with something that transcended the exhaustion evident in every line of her face. Darnell stared at the screen until the words blurred. Catherine's mother had been a waitress, a single parent, just like him. The next morning, he called the number on Catherine's business card. Her assistant answered on the first ring, professional and efficient. When Darnell gave his name, the assistant put him on hold for less than 30 seconds before Catherine picked up. "Mr. Williams, I need to know the real reason." No introduction, no pleasantries, the words coming out harder than he intended. "Why me?" The actual reason. There was a long silence on the other end, long enough that he thought maybe she had hung up. Then, "Come back to my office, 2 o'clock." He was there at 1:45 wearing the same button because it was the only one he owned. Catherine met him in the lobby herself this time, which surprised him. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, no makeup, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked younger like this, more human, less like the untouchable CEO from yesterday. She led him not to her office, but to a smaller conference room with a single window and a view of the parking garage. They sat across from each other at the table, and she folded her hands in front of her expression uncertain in a way he had not seen before. "My mother's name was Dorothy. She raised me alone. My father died when I was 3. She worked as a waitress at a place called Riverside Diner. 2 shifts a day, sometimes 3. She was exhausted all the time, but she never complained, not once." Darnell listened, not interrupting, sensing that this was important, that whatever she was about to say had weight. "When I was 15, she got hit by a drunk driver on her way home from work. Broke her back, 3 surgeries, physical therapy for months. We had insurance, but it wasn't enough. We were going to lose everything." Catherine's voice was steady, but her hands were folded so tight her knuckles had gone white. "There was a man who used to come into Riverside every morning. My mother said he was poor, worked construction, could barely afford breakfast. But when he heard what happened, he organized a fundraiser, got the whole neighborhood involved, raised enough to cover most of the bills." She looked out the window at the gray concrete and the cars parked in neat rows. "My mother tried to find him after she recovered, wanted to thank him, pay him back. But he was gone. Moved away, someone said. She never got to thank him. It bothered her for the rest of her life. And you're looking for him. He died 5 years ago. I found out too late." Catherine turned back to face him. "But I saw in you what my mother saw in him. Dignity without arrogance. Kindness without expectation. She used to say he always remembered her name, even though she was just the woman who poured his coffee. You do the same thing. You see people. So this is about your mother. This is about honoring what she valued, what she taught me." Her voice was firm now, stronger. "I'm not choosing you because you're poor. I'm choosing you because you're good." There's a difference. Darnell wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. But belief had burned him before, had left scars that still ached when he thought about them. "What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? My mother wasn't good enough by society's standards. She never finished college, worked minimum wage her whole life. But she was good. That's what matters." He sat with that for a long moment, letting the words settle into the empty spaces inside him. "Then I need to talk to my daughter." "Of course. 3 days, remember." He went home and made Maya her favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese from a box with hot dogs cut up in it. They ate in comfortable silence, Maya telling him about her day between bites. After dinner, he cleaned up the dishes while she finished her homework. When she was done, when the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic, he sat down beside her on the couch. "Maya, I need to talk to you about something important." She looked up at him with those serious eyes, so much like Michelle's. "Okay, Daddy." He told her about the job offer, about the money, about the new school. He kept it simple, watching her face for any sign of worry or fear. She listened without interrupting, her small hands folded in her lap, her expression thoughtful. "Would we have to move? No, baby? Same apartment? Same neighborhood? Would you still work at night?" "No. I'd work during the day. I'd be home for dinner every night." Her face lit up in a way that made his chest hurt. "Really? Really?" She threw her arms around his neck and held on tight. "Then you should do it, Daddy. I miss you at dinner." He held her and breathed in the smell of her shampoo and felt something crack inside him. Some wall he had built around his heart 5 years ago when Michelle died. This was not about his pride, about his fear, about his inability to trust. This was about Maya, about giving her a life where she did not have to count quarters for school supplies, where she did not have to watch him work himself to exhaustion for pennies. "Okay, I will." But then everything changed. Someone at Sterling Industries had talked. Maybe the receptionist, maybe the assistant, maybe someone who had seen him in the building and put the pieces together. It did not matter who. A local news website ran a story the next morning. "Billionaire Sterling plucks. Waiter from diner for high-paying position. What's the real story?" The article was full of speculation questions about why a successful CEO would hire someone with no experience, implications about their relationship. It stopped just short of saying anything actionable, but the insinuation was clear. By afternoon, Darnell's phone was blowing up with calls and texts. Jerome, Tiffany, Earl, people he barely knew from the diner. Everyone wanted to know what was going on, what was happening, whether the story was true. He ignored them all and focused on Maya, on keeping things normal, on pretending that the world was not suddenly paying attention to him in ways that felt dangerous. But then Maya's teacher called. Some of the kids at school had heard their parents talking. They were teasing Maya, calling her dad a gold digger, saying he was after Catherine's money. Maya did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. She came home crying, asking if Daddy had done something bad. He held her in his lap, wiping her tears with the sleeve of his shirt, feeling rage and shame and helplessness twist inside him like barbed wire. No, baby. Daddy didn't do anything wrong. Then why are they being mean? Because people don't always understand. But it's going to be okay. After she fell asleep, he called Catherine. His voice was tight when she answered. I can't do this. I can't let my daughter suffer because of me. Darnell, listen. The money isn't worth her dignity. I'm sorry, I can't. He hung up before she could respond, before she could talk him out of it, before he could change his mind. He sat in the dark living room and stared at Michelle's photograph on the wall and felt like he was drowning, like every choice led to the same place, like there was no way out no matter which direction he turned. Word count 9847. Scene opening. Hook through first meeting and rejection. Status, part 1. Complete transitioning to part 1B. The next morning, there was a knock on his door at 7:30. Darnell had not slept, had spent the night staring at the ceiling while his mind spun through scenarios that all ended badly. He opened the door and found Catherine Sterling standing in the hallway of his apartment building, looking completely out of place in her expensive coat and heels. Can I come in? He stepped aside because he did not know what else to do. She walked into the tiny apartment and looked around at the second-hand furniture, the toys scattered on the floor, the photograph of Michelle on the wall. Maya was eating cereal at the small table still in her pajamas, and she looked up with wide eyes. Who's that, Daddy? This is Miss Sterling. He did not know how to finish that sentence. Catherine walked over and crouched down next to Maya's chair, bringing herself to eye level with the little girl. Hi, Maya. I brought you something. She pulled a book from her bag. The science book from the store, the one Maya had looked at with longing before deciding they could not afford it. Maya's eyes went wide. How did you know your dad told me you like science? I thought you might like this. Maya looked at Darnell, uncertain whether she was allowed to accept it. He nodded and she took the book carefully, like it might break if she held it wrong. Thank you. Catherine stayed crouched there, her eyes level with Maya's. Your dad is the bravest man I know. He said no to a lot of money because he loves you. He wanted to protect you. That's what real fathers do. Maya's lip trembled. But the kids at school said, the kids at school don't know what they're talking about. Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. My mom was like your dad. She worked hard. People look down on her sometimes. But I was proud of her. And you should be proud of your dad. He's a good man. Don't let anyone tell you different. Maya nodded, tears running down her cheeks. Catherine stood and turned to Darnell. I'm handling the newspaper. They'll print a retraction. And I've already called Maya's school. If any child harasses her again, there will be consequences. She met his eyes. If you walk away, I respect that. But know this. You're not doing this for money. You're doing this so other families don't have to feel what you're feeling right now. Your daughter will be proud. Not because you're rich, because you help people. She walked to the door, then stopped. 3 days, Darnell. That's what I said. You still have one left. After she left, Maya climbed into his lap, still holding the book. Daddy is... She nice. He thought about it. Really thought about it, weighing everything he had seen against everything he feared. Yeah, baby, I think she is. Then maybe you should help her, like you help people at the diner. The simplicity of it cut through all his defenses, all his carefully constructed reasons for saying no. This was not about him. This had never been about him. It was about Maya and all the other Mayas out there who learned too young not to ask for things, who counted coins and borrowed books because $15 might as well be $1 million. That night, Darnell did not sleep. He lay on the pull-out couch while Maya breathed softly in the next room, and he thought about Michelle. The way she had looked the morning before the accident, kissing Maya's forehead before her shift. The way she had always said, give her the life I couldn't give her. He had been trying for 5 years, but trying was not enough. Trying did not pay bills, did not open doors, did not change the fundamental mathematics of poverty. At 5 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and made coffee. The apartment was quiet and dark, the city just beginning to wake up outside his window. He sat at the small table and thought about Catherine's words about Dorothy Sterling, who had worked herself to exhaustion, about the man who had helped when no one else would, about the weight of kindness passed from stranger to stranger across decades. Maya wandered out of the bedroom at 6:30, rubbing her eyes. She climbed into his lap without a word and pressed her face against his chest. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always, baby, if you can help other kids like me, why don't you? The question was simple. The answer was not. He thought about all his reasons, the fear of failure, the shame of accepting help, the worry that he was not good enough. But Maya was 7 years old and she already understood something he had been too afraid to see. This was not about him. You're right, I should. She looked up at him, her eyes serious. Then do it, Daddy. He called Catherine at 7. She answered on the first ring like she had been waiting. I'm in, but I have conditions. I'm listening. 6 months trial period. I don't take the scholarship for Maya until I've proven I can do the job. I keep working 1 shift a week at the diner to remember where I came from. And every decision about the program goes through me. I'm not a figurehead. If I do this, I do it right. There was a brief silence. Then deal. You're tougher than I thought. I learned from watching my wife work doubles. When can you start? 2 weeks. I need to give Earl proper notice. 2 weeks. Welcome aboard, Darnell. He hung up and sat there with his daughter in his lap, feeling something shift inside him. Not hope exactly, not quite belief, but something close to both, something that felt like possibility, like maybe the world was not quite as closed as he had thought, like maybe kindness could be repaid even if it took decades. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and goodbyes. He told Earl first, sitting down in the office after the lunch rush. Earl listened without interrupting, his weathered face unreadable. When Darnell finished, Earl was quiet for a long moment. You sure about this? No, but I have to try. Earl nodded slowly. You've been one of the best workers I've ever had. Honest, reliable, good with customers. But I've watched you kill yourself here for 5 years. If this is your chance to do something better, you take it. I want to keep 1 shift a week. Friday nights, if that's okay. Earl smiled. Doors always open. Telling Jerome was harder. They had worked together for 5 years, had become something close to friends in the way men do when they share space and time but rarely talk about anything real. Jerome listened to the explanation with his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. Rich people don't give, Darnell. They buy. What do you think she wants to buy from you? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe she's different. Nobody's different. Jerome scraped the grill with hard, angry motions. Just be careful. When people like us get involved with people like her, we're always the ones who end up paying. Maybe, but I have to try. Jerome softened, then his shoulders dropping. Yeah, I guess you do. Just don't forget where you came from. I won't. That's why I'm keeping the Friday shift. Tiffany hugged him when she heard her eyes bright with tears. My cousin worked for one of Sterling's companies. She's ruthless in business, but she's fair. If you work hard, she'll take care of you. That's all I'm asking for. The hardest part was telling Maya that things were going to change. He sat her down and explained that he would be working during the day now that he would be home every evening, that they would have more money for things like books and clothes. She listened with that serious expression she wore when trying to understand adult concepts. Does this mean you won't be tired all the time? The question broke something in him. Yeah, baby, I won't be as tired. Good. I like it when you're happy. I'm always happy when I'm with you. She smiled and hugged him tight. I'm proud of you, Daddy. Those words stayed with him through the last shift at Golden Oak Diner, through the goodbyes to regulars who barely noticed he was leaving, through the drive home on what would be his last night working until midnight. He was not naive enough to think this would be easy, not foolish enough to believe that one job would solve all his problems. But for the first time in 5 years, he felt like he was moving forward instead of just surviving, like maybe Michelle's death had not condemned him to a life of barely scraping by. The night before his first day at Sterling Industries, Darnell could not sleep. He lay on the pull-out couch and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. He thought about Catherine Sterling changing her mind about him failing in the first week, about going back to the diner with his tail between his legs, and everyone knowing he had tried and failed. He thought about Maya watching him fail, about losing whatever respect she still had for him. But then he thought about Dorothy Sterling, working 2 jobs to put her daughter through school. He thought about the construction worker who had organized a fundraiser for a waitress he barely knew. He thought about Michelle, who had worked herself to exhaustion and still found energy to play with their daughter, who had believed until the end that Darnell could give Maya a better life. At 5 in the morning, he got up and showered. He put on his wedding suit, the same one he had worn to both meetings with Catherine, and looked at himself in the mirror. A black man, 34 years old, about to walk into a world he did not understand. But he was walking in. That was what mattered. He was trying. Maya woke up as he was leaving. She stumbled out of the bedroom in her pajamas and threw her arms around him. "Good luck, Daddy. Thanks, baby. Mrs. Robinson will be here in an hour to get you ready for school." "I know." She kissed his cheek. "You're going to be great." He held her for a long moment, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling the weight of everything he was doing this for. Then he let go and walked out the door and down the stairs and across the parking lot to his car. The city was just waking up, the sky lightening from black to gray. He drove through streets that were familiar and foreign, at the same time heading toward a building that represented everything he had lost 5 years ago and everything he might gain back. The lobby of Sterling Industries looked different at 8 in the morning. It was crowded with people arriving for work, everyone moving with purpose, everyone belonging. Darnell stood just inside the revolving door for a moment, watching, trying to gather his courage. Then he walked to the reception desk where a different woman sat, younger than yesterday, her smile automatic. Darnell Williams, first day. She checked her computer, then handed him a badge. 38th floor. Catherine's assistant will meet you. The elevator was crowded this time, packed with people in suits, who all seemed to know each other, who all talked about projects and meetings and acronyms Darnell did not understand. He stood in the back corner and tried to make himself small, tried not to think about how different he looked from everyone else, how cheap his suit was compared to theirs, how out of place he felt. The doors opened on the 38th floor, and Michael was waiting, the same assistant from before. He smiled and extended his hand. "Welcome to Sterling Industries. Let me show you to your office." "My office, of course. You're part of the executive team now." They walked down the hallway, and Michael stopped at a door with a nameplate that read Darnell Williams, Community Outreach Manager. The office was smaller than Catherine's, but still larger than any space Darnell had ever worked in. It had a desk, a computer, a window with a view of the city. It looked like something from a movie, like a place where important people made important decisions. "Catherine wants to see you at 9. I'll come get you." Darnell stepped into his office and closed the door behind him. He stood there for a long moment, looking at the desk, the computer, the nameplate with his name on it. This was real. This was actually happening. He sat down in the chair, and it was comfortable, expensive, the kind of chair that cost more than a week of his salary at the diner. He put his hands on the desk and felt the smooth wood under his palms. There was a photograph of Maya in his pocket, one he carried everywhere. He pulled it out and set it on the corner of the desk. She was smiling in the picture, her hair in pigtails, missing her 2 front teeth. This was why he was here. This was what mattered. At 9, Michael knocked and led him to Catherine's office. She was on the phone when they entered, her voice crisp and professional. She gestured for him to sit and wrapped up the call quickly. "First day. How are you feeling?" "Terrified." She smiled. "Good. That means you're taking it seriously." She slid a folder across the desk. "This is everything you need to know about the Second Chances Initiative. Budget, timeline, goals. I've scheduled meetings for you with our legal team, our finance team, and representatives from 3 nonprofits who want to partner with us. When starting at 10? She looked at him, her expression serious. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're here because I believe you can do this. Trust yourself. What if I can't? Then we'll figure it out together. But you won't fail, Darnell. You're not capable of giving up." Those words carried him through the first meeting, through legal jargon he barely understood, and financial projections that made his head spin. They carried him through lunch with the nonprofit representatives, through conversations about systemic poverty and generational trauma, through concepts he had lived but never had words for. By the end of the day, his brain hurt, his feet hurt, everything hurt. But he had survived. When he got home at 6, Maya ran to the door and threw herself into his arms. "You're home, I told you I would be. Did you like it?" He thought about that, really thought about it. The meetings, the office, the people who looked at him with curiosity or skepticism, or sometimes nothing at all. It was overwhelming and terrifying and completely foreign. But he had survived. He had made it through one day. That was enough. "Yeah, baby, I think I'm going to like it." They made dinner together, pasta with sauce this time, because he had stopped at the store on the way home and bought the good kind. They ate at the small table, and Maya told him about her day, about the science project she was starting, about Emma, who had brought cupcakes to school. Darnell listened and nodded and felt something unclench in his chest, some knot that had been there for 5 years, slowly beginning to loosen. After Maya went to bed, he sat on the couch with his laptop and opened the folder Catherine had given him. The Second Chances Initiative. He read through it slowly, taking notes, trying to understand the scope of what they were trying to build. A program for single parents in difficult circumstances, job training, placement assistance, childcare, and support educational grants. The budget was massive, the timeline aggressive, the goals ambitious. And he was supposed to help make it happen. He thought about Dorothy Sterling, working 2 jobs to raise her daughter. He thought about Michelle, working doubles at the hospital. He thought about all the single parents out there who were doing exactly what he had been doing, trying to survive, trying to give their children a chance, trying to hold on to dignity in a world that seemed designed to strip it away. This was not just a job. This was a responsibility. This was a chance to help people who were exactly where he had been 1 week ago. The weight of it pressed down on him, but it did not feel crushing. It felt right. He worked until midnight, reading and planning and taking notes. When he finally closed the laptop and lay down on the pull-out couch, he thought about Catherine's words. "You're not capable of giving up." Maybe she was right. Maybe 5 years of surviving had taught him something, had given him a strength he did not know he possessed. Maybe this was his chance to turn suffering into purpose, to take everything he had learned from being poor and use it to help others climb out of the same hole. The next morning, he woke up early and got ready for his second day. Maya was still asleep when he left, but he kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you, baby." Then he drove through the city as the sun rose, heading toward a building full of people who still did not know what to make of him, heading toward a job he was terrified of failing, and heading toward a future that was uncertain and scary and full of possibility. In his pocket was the photograph of Maya. In his mind was the memory of Michelle's voice. "Give her the life I couldn't give her." And in his chest was something he had not felt in 5 years: hope. Not the naive kind that believed everything would be okay, but the stubborn kind that refused to give up no matter how hard things got. The kind that said, "I'm going to keep trying, I'm going to keep fighting, I'm going to give my daughter a better life. And maybe, just maybe, I'm going to help other families do the same." The first month was harder than anything Darnell had imagined. He arrived at Sterling Industries every morning at 8, walked through that lobby full of confident people, rode the elevator to the 38th floor, and felt like an imposter. The other employees looked at him with barely concealed curiosity. He heard the whispers in the break room, saw the glances exchanged when he walked past. The guy Catherine plucked from a diner. The charity case she felt sorry for. He did not defend himself. He just worked. The office felt foreign despite the nameplate with his name on it. The computer was newer than anything he had ever used. The phone had buttons he did not understand. Michael, Catherine's assistant, showed him the basics, but there was no manual for navigating a corporate environment when you had spent the last 5 years serving coffee. Darnell learned by watching, by listening, by making mistakes when no one was looking and fixing them before anyone noticed. Catherine had scheduled meetings that filled his calendar like landmines. Every day brought new faces, new names, new acronyms. The legal team explained liability concerns in language that required translation. The finance team showed him spreadsheets with numbers that made his vision blur. The nonprofit partners talked about systemic barriers and intersectional approaches using terminology that sounded important but felt hollow compared to the reality of counting quarters for bread. He nodded in the right places. He asked questions that probably sounded stupid. He took notes until his hand cramped, and then he took more notes because forgetting something felt like failure. On Thursday of his first week, a woman named Patricia Vance cornered him in the hallway. She was maybe 45, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from never doubting you belonged. She worked in corporate communications, and her smile was sharp as broken glass. "So you're Catherine's special project." The tone made it clear what she thought of that. "I'm the community outreach manager, right? And before this, you were serving eggs and coffee." She tilted her head. Must be quite the adjustment. Every muscle in his body wanted to defend himself, to explain, to justify. But he had learned long ago that some people were not interested in understanding. They had already decided who you were, and nothing you said would change that. "If you'll excuse me, I have a meeting." He walked past her and did not look back. In the bathroom, he splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection. A black man in a suit that still did not fit right, standing in a building where half the people thought he did not belong. He thought about walking out, about going back to the diner where at least everyone treated him like a person instead of a curiosity. But then he thought about Maya, about $75,000, about the chance to help families who were drowning the same way he had been drowning. He dried his face and went to his next meeting. By the second week, Darnell had stopped trying to fit in and started focusing on the work. Catherine had given him access to files from 3 nonprofits that wanted to partner on the Second Chances initiative. He spent hours reading case studies, intake forms, outcome reports. The language was clinical and detached, but beneath it, he saw real people. Single mothers working 3 jobs, fathers who could not afford childcare, families one emergency away from homelessness. He knew these stories. He had lived them. The nonprofits were well-meaning, but their approaches felt wrong. Too much paperwork, too many hoops to jump through, too much focus on proving you deserved help instead of just giving it. Darnell started making notes in the margins, suggesting changes, questioning assumptions. Why did someone need 3 references to qualify for job training? Why did childcare assistants require a 2-week application process when parents needed help now? During a meeting with the partnership director from Safe Harbor Family Services, a nonprofit that had been doing this work for 20 years, Darnell spoke up for the first time. "This application is 12 pages long." The director, a white woman named Lauren Matthews, looked surprised that he was challenging her. "That's standard. We need to verify eligibility. You're asking for pay stubs, tax returns, proof of residence references. Someone working 2 jobs doesn't have time to gather all this. We have to ensure program integrity. Or you're creating barriers that keep out the people who need help most." The room went quiet. Lauren's smile tightened. "With respect, Mr. Williams, we've been doing this for 2 decades. We know what works." "Then why are there still so many families falling through the cracks?" Catherine, who had been sitting silently at the head of the table, leaned forward. "He has a point, Lauren. If the application process is preventing access, we need to streamline it. But the verification requirements are negotiable." Catherine's voice left no room for argument. "Work with Darnell to redesign the intake process. Make it as simple as possible while maintaining accountability." After the meeting, Lauren pulled Darnell aside. Her expression was carefully neutral. "You're going to make a lot of people uncomfortable." "Good." She studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what we need." The program took shape slowly, painfully, through endless revisions and debates. Darnell pushed for simplicity: 1-page applications, same-day approvals for emergency assistance, partnerships with companies willing to hire people with gaps in their resumes instead of just talking about second chances. Childcare vouchers that started immediately instead of after 2 weeks of paperwork. Educational grants that covered books and supplies, not just tuition. Every suggestion met resistance. Too risky, too expensive, too complicated to implement. But Catherine backed him every time, and slowly the resistance crumbled into grudging acceptance. On Friday of his 3rd week, Darnell worked his first shift back at Golden Oak Diner. Earl had kept his word, holding the Friday night slot open. Darnell changed in the bathroom, trading his suit for the uniform he had worn for 5 years. The fabric felt strange now, too familiar and too foreign at the same time. Frank was at the counter when Darnell emerged from the back. The trucker did a double take. "Heard you went corporate on us." "Just working a different job during the week." "Still need to remember where I came from." "Smart man." Frank raised his coffee cup in salute. "Too many people forget once they move up." The shift felt surreal. Darnell moved through the motions, automatically refilling coffee, taking orders, clearing tables, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about intake forms and partnership agreements, about the families waiting for help, about all the ways the system could fail them if he did not get this right. During his break, Jerome cornered him in the kitchen. "You look different. It's the same uniform. Not talking about the clothes, you look like you're carrying weight. I am. This job, Jerome, it's harder than anything I've done. And if I mess it up, people suffer." Jerome scraped the grill in silence for a moment. "You know what your problem is? You think you have to be perfect. But perfect doesn't exist. You just have to be good enough. What if good enough isn't enough? Then you get up and try again tomorrow. That's all any of us can do." The words stayed with Darnell through the rest of his shift, through the drive home, through the weekend, when he reviewed files and made notes and tried to prepare for the moment when the program would launch and real families would depend on him. Monday morning, Catherine called him to her office. When he arrived, she was standing at the window looking out at the city spread below. "We're ready to launch. Next week." "Are you?" "No, but I don't think I'll ever feel ready." She turned to face him. "I'm going to give you the first case file myself, a woman named Tamara Jenkins, single mother, 2 kids working overnight stocking shelves, making $12 an hour and barely covering rent. She applied 3 weeks ago through Safe Harbor." Catherine handed him a folder. Inside was a photograph of a black woman, maybe 30 years old, exhausted eyes above a forced smile. 2 children in the photo with her, both under 10. What does she need? A way out, a better job, childcare she can afford. Hope. Darnell looked at the photograph and saw himself, saw Maya, saw every struggling parent who had ever counted pennies and prayed for a miracle. No pressure. Catherine's expression softened. "You can do this. Just treat her the way you wanted to be treated when you were in her shoes." The next day, Darnell drove to Tamara Jenkins' apartment in a neighborhood that reminded him of his own. Peeling paint, cracked sidewalks, cars that had seen better decades. He climbed stairs that smelled like old cooking oil and knocked on a door that had been painted so many times the numbers were barely visible. Tamara answered wearing scrubs, her hair wrapped in a scarf, her face showing the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who had not slept properly in years. Behind her, 2 children watched cartoons on a television that was older than they were. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm Darnell Williams from Sterling Industries." Her expression shuddered, immediately defensive and wary. "If this is about the application I already explained, I can't provide 3 years of tax returns. I've been doing gig work, and this isn't about paperwork. I'm here to help." They sat at her kitchen table, a folding card table that wobbled on uneven legs. Darnell asked about her situation, her goals, what she needed. She answered cautiously at first, testing to see if this was real or another bureaucratic dead end. But as he listened without judgment, without demanding proof of worthiness, something shifted. "I want to work in medical billing." Tamara's voice gained strength as she spoke. "I'm good with computers. I'm organized. I just need certification and someone willing to give me a chance." "What's stopping you? The course costs $1,500, and it's during the day, so I'd have to quit my job. I can't afford not to work even for 3 months." Darnell pulled out the folder he had prepared. "The program will cover the certification course. We've partnered with City General Hospital. They'll hire you for their billing department after you complete training. And we'll provide childcare assistance so your kids are covered while you're in class." Tamara stared at the documents like they might disappear if she looked away. "This is real. It's real. You start next month if you want to." Her hands shook as she reached for the papers. "Why would you do this?" "You don't even know me." "Because I know what it's like." Darnell met her eyes. "And because everyone deserves a chance to do better." Tamara's children had stopped watching television. They were watching their mother cry, watching a stranger offer her something no one had offered before possibility. Within 2 weeks, Tamara was enrolled in the certification course. Within 6 weeks, 2 more families had entered the program. A single father working security who wanted to be an EMT. A mother of 3 who wanted to finish her nursing degree. Each one a story Darnell knew by heart because he had lived it, because he understood the weight of wanting something better and not being able to reach it. Then Jerome showed up at his office on a Wednesday afternoon, hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable in the glass and steel building. "I shouldn't have doubted you." The words came out rough. "I'm sorry. You were protecting me." "Nothing to apologize for." Jerome sat down heavily in one of the chairs across from Darnell's desk. I've been thinking about what you said, about second chances. He paused, choosing words carefully. I've been cooking in diners for 35 years. I'm good at it. But I always wanted to be more than a short order cook. I wanted to be a real chef. We can make that happen. It took 2 weeks to get Jerome enrolled in a culinary program at the community college partnered with a mentorship at one of the best restaurants downtown. The program covered tuition and connected him with Chef Marcus Chen, who had built his reputation on taking raw talent and turning it into excellence. When Darnell told Jerome the news, the older man's eyes went bright with something that looked like tears. I'm 53 years old. Most people think I'm too old to start over. Most people are wrong. 6 weeks after the program launched, Darnell stood in Catherine's office reviewing metrics. 50 families enrolled, 20 already placed in better jobs, 15 children receiving educational support. The numbers were good, but they felt abstract, disconnected from the real people behind them. This is working. Catherine studied the reports with satisfaction. You're exceeding projections. It's not enough. There are thousands of families out there who need help. Rome wasn't built in a day. She looked up from the papers. You need to celebrate the wins, Darnell. Otherwise, this will burn you out. I'll celebrate when everyone who needs help gets it. That's not sustainable. Catherine set down the reports and stood walking to the window. I need you to pace yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Before Darnell could respond, Michael burst through the door without knocking, his face pale. Catherine, we need an ambulance. Now, what happened? It's you. You just collapsed in the conference room. Catherine frowned, confused. I'm right here. No, Michael looked between them, flustered. You were 10 minutes ago. Medical is with you now, but they want to take you to the hospital. Catherine's hand went to the desk, steadying herself. I'm fine. You're not fine. Michael's voice was firm. You've been working 90-hour weeks for months. The doctor said your blood pressure is dangerously high. Within an hour, Catherine was at the hospital being held for observation. Darnell stayed at the office fielding questions, managing the growing crisis of a CEO who had pushed herself past breaking. That evening, an emergency board meeting was called. Darnell was not invited, but he heard about it from Michael, who looked grim as he relayed the news. They're talking about suspending the Second Chances initiative. The words hit like a physical blow. On what grounds? Too expensive. Too risky. Catherine's hospitalization has them worried about the company's direction. They think she's overextended. Darnell felt rage build in his chest, hot and sharp. We have 50 families depending on this program. I know. Michael's expression was sympathetic. But the board controls the budget. Without Catherine there to defend it, he did not need to finish the sentence. Darnell understood how this worked. A program for poor people was always the first thing cut when budgets got tight, always the expendable initiative, always worth less than quarterly profits. That night, Darnell barely slept. He thought about Tamara, about Jerome, about the families who had finally found hope after years of struggling. He thought about Maya, about the scholarship he had not yet accepted because he wanted to prove himself first. He thought about all the reasons this could fail, all the ways the system was designed to protect wealth instead of spread it. The next morning, he dressed in his best suit, still the one from his wedding, still too tight in the shoulders, and walked into Sterling Industries with his jaw set. Michael tried to stop him in the hallway. Darnell, the board meeting is closed. You can't just watch me. He pushed open the conference room doors without knocking. 12 board members in expensive suits looked up, startled. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Robert Thornton, frowned. Mr. Williams, this is a closed meeting. I know, I'm here anyway. Darnell stayed standing, his hands flat on the polished table. You want to cut the program? I'm here to tell you why you shouldn't. We've reviewed the numbers. Thornton's voice was ice. The program is expensive and the ROI is unclear. The numbers don't tell you everything. Then enlighten us. One of the other board members, a woman named Sandra Chen, leaned back in her chair. You have 5 minutes. Darnell looked at each of them in turn. These people who had never worried about money, who made decisions that affected lives without understanding what those lives actually looked like. Catherine's mother was a waitress, worked 2 jobs her whole life. When she got hurt, a construction worker who could barely afford breakfast organized a fundraiser to help her. That man didn't do it for ROI. He did it because he saw her, because she remembered his name, Because dignity matters. The room was silent. You're not investing in a program, you're investing in dignity. And dignity pays back in ways money can't measure. It pays back in kids who grow up without shame, in parents who can look their children in the eye, in communities that remember kindness and pass it forward. Darnell straightened his voice, gaining strength. Tomorrow, one of our first participants is already volunteering at the program helping other mothers. Jerome is mentoring 2 younger cooks. That's not on any spreadsheet, but that's what lasts. He looked at Robert Thornton directly. If you cut this program, you're not just cutting boss, you're cutting hope. And I won't be part of that. So either you keep it running or I walk. Your choice, Dershaus. He left before they could respond, his heart hammering against his ribs. Michael was waiting in the hallway, his eyes wide. That was either brilliant or career suicide, probably both. 2 hours later, Catherine called him from the hospital. Her voice was tired, but amused. The board voted to continue funding, unanimously. What did you say to them? The truth. She laughed, then coughed. I picked the right person. You need to rest. The program can wait. The program is in good hands. That's why I can rest. After she hung up, Darnell sat in his office and stared at the photograph of Maya on his desk. He had walked into a board meeting uninvited and threatened to quit if they did not keep funding a program that helped poor people. He had challenged some of the most powerful people in the city. He had bet everything on the belief that kindness mattered more than profit margins. And somehow, impossibly, he had won. 6 months passed like water through fingers. Darnell measured time not in days, but in families helped in lives changed by increments, so small they almost seemed invisible, until you stepped back and saw the larger picture. The Second Chances initiative had grown from an ambitious concept into something real and breathing something that existed independent of Catherine's vision or Darnell's fear of failure. Tamara Jenkins finished her medical billing certification in 3 months instead of 4. She was hired at City General Hospital with a starting salary that doubled what she had made stocking shelves. The first week she brought her paycheck to the office, not because she needed to show proof, but because she wanted someone to understand what it meant. She sat across from Darnell's desk, and her hands shook as she held the paper. I can afford my rent without choosing between electricity and food. Her voice cracked. I can buy my kids new shoes that actually fit. I can breathe. That's all you, the work you put in. No. She met his eyes, fierce and certain. You gave me the chance. I'm paying it forward. Within a month, Tamara was volunteering at the program intake center 3 evenings a week. She helped other single mothers navigate paperwork, translated the bureaucratic language into something human, offered the kind of hope that only comes from someone who had walked the same path. Darnell watched her transform from someone who needed help into someone who gave it, and he understood that this was what mattered. Not the metrics Catherine showed the board, not the positive press coverage, not the way people at Sterling Industries had stopped whispering about him. What mattered was watching dignity restored, watching people remember they were capable of more than survival. Jerome completed his culinary program in 5 months. Chef Marcus Chen hired him as a line cook at Meridian, the restaurant that had been written up in every food magazine that existed. Jerome worked harder than anyone half his age, showed up early, and stayed late, absorbed technique and criticism with equal hunger. Within 2 months, Marcus promoted him to sous chef. On a Tuesday evening in his 6th month at Sterling Industries, Jerome showed up at Darnell's office carrying a white paper bag. Inside were 2 dishes he had prepared: pan-seared scallops with cauliflower puree and a braised short rib that fell apart at the touch of a fork. Taste this. Jerome's expression was neutral, but his eyes betrayed nervousness. Darnell took a bite of the scallops. The flavor was complex and perfectly balanced, the kind of food he had only seen in magazines. This is incredible. Marcus says I have talent. Real talent. Jerome sat down heavily. I'm 53 years old and someone finally sees what I can do. Because you made one phone call. Because you were willing to try me. Jerome shook his head slowly. I spent 35 years convincing myself I was just a diner cook. That's all I'd ever be. You didn't let me believe that lie anymore. After Jerome left, Darnell sat in his office as the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. 73 families had come through the program now. Not all of them had success stories like Tamara or Jerome. Some dropped out after a few weeks, overwhelmed by the demands of training while managing everything else. Some got better jobs but still struggled because poverty was not a problem you solved with one intervention. Some disappeared entirely, falling back into whatever survival strategies had kept them going before. But even the ones who did not make it through showed up in different ways. A father who dropped out of the EMT program because his car broke down still sent thank you notes saying someone had finally listened. A mother who could not finish her degree still used the childcare vouchers to take her kids to the park for the first time in 2 years. Small victories that never made it into the quarterly reports but mattered more than any metric. Catherine returned to work after 3 weeks against her doctor's orders and everyone's advice. She looked thinner, more tired, but something had shifted in her too. She delegated more trusted Darnell to make decisions without running them past her. First stopped checking email at midnight. During their weekly meetings, she asked different questions now. Not about numbers and timelines, but about the people. About whether tomorrow's kids were doing better in school. About whether Jerome was happy. About what Darnell needed to keep doing this without burning out the way she almost had. You were right to threaten to quit. Catherine said this during a meeting in early November. The board needed to hear that some things matter more than profit. I didn't think it would work. Neither did I, she smiled. But here we are. The apartment where Darnell and Maya lived had not changed. Same peeling paint, same broken tiles in the bathroom, same refrigerator that hummed too loud. But everything felt different. Darnell came home every evening at 6. He helped Maya with homework while dinner cooked. They ate together at the small table and talked about their days. He was not too exhausted to listen anymore, not too stressed to laugh at her jokes, not mentally calculating how many hours until his next shift. Maya blossomed under the attention. Her grades improved. She joined the science club at school. She started asking questions about the world that showed she was thinking beyond just surviving day to day. And every night before bed, she hugged him tight and said, "I'm glad you're home, Daddy." Those words made everything worth it. In mid-November, an envelope arrived from Maya's school. The scholarship Catherine had promised, the one Darnell had said he would not accept until he proved he could do the job. He had proven it. 73 families, 6 months of success. The scholarship would cover full tuition at Westbridge Academy, one of the best private schools in the state. Small class sizes, advanced curriculum opportunities Maya could not access at her current school. He opened the envelope and read the acceptance letter. Then he read it again. Then he called Maya into the living room and sat her down on the couch. "Miss Sterling's company wants to give you a scholarship to a fancy school. Westbridge Academy. You'd get better teachers, better classes, more opportunities." Maya's eyes lit up. "Really? Really? But I need to know what you want." She thought about it with that serious expression she wore when considering important questions. "Would I still see Emma? And my other friends? Probably not. Westbridge is across town. Different neighborhood, different kids." Maya looked down at her hands, small and still holding the stuffed rabbit she had carried since she was 2. "I like my school. My friends know me. Miss Peterson knows that I love science. She lets me do extra projects." Darnell felt something ease in his chest. "Me too. I like your school too. So can we stay?" He thought about Catherine's offer, about the prestige and opportunity, about giving Maya every advantage he could. But he also thought about the way she smiled when Emma came over to play, about how she had started tutoring a younger student who struggled with reading, about the community she had built in a place that was not fancy, but was hers. "Yeah, baby, we can stay." He drafted an email to Catherine that evening, declining the scholarship but thanking her for the offer. He explained that Maya was thriving where she was, that sometimes the best opportunity was not the most expensive one. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Catherine's response came within an hour. "That's exactly the right decision, and exactly why I chose you." On the Friday after Thanksgiving, Darnell worked his usual shift at Golden Oak Diner. Earl had kept the tradition going for 6 months now, holding that slot open, never complaining when Darnell showed up in his uniform instead of his suit. The diner felt like coming home, like remembering who he had been before any of this started. Frank was at the counter telling a new story, this one, about a load of Christmas trees he had hauled to Denver. Jerome was gone now, working at Meridian, but a new cook named Luis worked the grill with similar efficiency. Brittany had graduated from her nursing program and was working at Mercy Hospital, but she still came in sometimes to eat and leave big tips for the servers who reminded her of herself 6 months ago. The dinner rush was winding down when a young man walked in, maybe 25, wearing work clothes stained with paint. His face showed exhaustion that went bone deep, the kind that came from working multiple jobs and still falling short. He sat at the counter and studied the menu with the careful attention of someone counting every dollar. Darnell approached with the coffee pot. Long day, long 3 days. The man tried to smile, but it came out hollow. I'm Andre. Just started painting apartments in the complex down the street. This seemed like a good place to grab something before my next shift. What's your next shift? Overnight security at the mall. Then I have classes at 8. Darnell poured coffee without being asked. What are you studying, Art? Andre's expression shifted, showing passion breaking through the exhaustion. I'm trying to get into the state university's MFA program. But that's probably stupid. People always say artists starve. People say a lot of things. Most of them are wrong. Andre ordered the cheapest item on the menu, coffee and toast. When Darnell brought the check, he had already crossed out the total and written 0 in black ink. The young man stared at it, his eyes going bright. I can pay. I have money. Save it for your art supplies. Someone did this for me once. Just pay it forward someday. Who are you? Just someone who remembers what it's like. Andre left 20 minutes later, but not before writing his phone number on a napkin and sliding it across the counter. If you ever need a mural painted or anything, I work cheap. I owe you. You don't owe me anything, but I'll keep your number. After Andre left, Darnell stood behind the counter and felt the weight of everything that had happened in 6 months. He had gone from serving coffee to managing a program that helped families. He had stood up to a board of directors and won. He had watched people he helped turn around and help others. And now he was back where he started, in a diner at midnight, giving away toast to someone who needed to believe kindness still existed. The cycle continued. That was what mattered. Not the destination, but the movement, the passing forward of small mercies that accumulated into something larger. Near closing time, Darnell noticed a woman sitting alone in the corner booth. The same booth where Catherine had sat 6 months ago, watching him, testing him, deciding whether he was worth the risk. This woman wore a black coat and held a cup of coffee she barely touched. He walked over with the pot. Can I warm that up? She looked up and he saw it was Catherine. She smiled, tired but genuine. I think I'm good. What are you doing here? Remembering. She gestured to the booth. This is where it started. I wanted to see how it was going. Darnell slid into the booth across from her, breaking every rule about fraternizing with customers. You're supposed to be resting. I'm resting better now than I have in years, because I'm not carrying everything alone anymore. She took a sip of coffee, made a face. This is terrible. Yeah, but it's honest. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Through the windows, the city moved in its late-night rhythm. Cars passing, streetlights flickering, people living lives that intersected briefly and then moved on. That man you helped tonight. Catherine said it quietly. Andre, what did you see in him? Someone trying. That's all anyone needs to be. She pulled out her wallet and left 2 $50 bills on the table, plus a folded note tucked underneath. Darnell picked it up and read, You're doing great. Keep going. CS, this is too much. It's exactly enough. Catherine stood and buttoned her coat. His name is Andre Sullivan. He's trying to get into the state university's MFA program. Talented painter. He needs someone to believe in him. How do you know that? Because I pay attention. Same as you. She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. That man you helped tonight, he's going to be fine. Because someone saw him, just like someone saw you. Just like someone saw my mother all those years ago. After she left, Darnell stood there holding the note and the $100. He put the money in the team tip jar, where it would be split among all the servers tomorrow. But he kept the note, slipping it into his pocket next to the photograph of Maya he always carried. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets were quiet. Darnell locked up the diner and walked to his car, the old Accord that still needed work, but kept running because it had to. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Love you, Daddy. See you in the morning. He smiled and texted back, Love you too, baby. Some tips were not measured in dollars. Some tips changed lives. And some tips kept changing, them rippling outward in ways you could never predict. From Dorothy Sterling to a construction worker whose name was lost to time. From that worker to Catherine. From Catherine to him. From him to Tamara and Jerome and Andre and dozens of others whose names he knew, and hundreds more he would never meet, but who would be touched by this expanding circle of care. Darnell sat in his car for a moment before starting the engine. 6 months ago, he had been a waiter drowning in exhaustion and poverty, convinced that survival was the only option available to him. Now he was someone who helped others escape that same trap. Not by saving them, that was the language of charity and condescension, but by giving them tools-based belief, by seeing them when everyone else looked through them. He thought about Catherine's words, "Dignity isn't about what you do, it's about how you do it." He thought about Maya's question, "If you can help other kids like me, why don't you?" He thought about Jerome saying, "You didn't let me believe that lie anymore." He thought about Tamara crying over a paycheck that meant breathing room. He thought about Andre's eyes lighting up when Darnell said people who claimed artists starve were wrong. This was not a job. This was a calling. This was the life Michelle had asked him to build, not just for Maya, but for everyone who needed someone to remember their name, to treat them like they mattered, to believe in their capacity to do better. Darnell started the car and drove home through streets that were familiar and foreign at the same time. He passed the grocery store where he no longer had to choose between electricity and food. He passed Maya's school where she was thriving with her friends who knew her. He passed the apartment complex where Tamara lived with her kids in a place that finally felt stable. When he parked in his usual spot, when he climbed the stairs to Unit 2C, when he unlocked the door and stepped inside, Maya's nightlight was glowing in the bedroom doorway. That small yellow star she had picked out herself, the one that had guided him home through 5 years of darkness. He checked on her first as always. She was asleep, curled around her stuffed rabbit, her face peaceful in the way that only children's faces could be. He stood there for a long moment, watching her breathe, feeling gratitude so intense it hurt. Tomorrow he would go back to Sterling Industries. He would meet with 2 new families who needed help. He would review applications and make phone calls and fight with bureaucrats who thought paperwork mattered more than people. He would do it all again because that was what you did when you found purpose. You kept showing up. But tonight he just stood in his daughter's doorway and remembered that every choice he had made, the fear and doubt, the risk and leap, the work and exhaustion, had led to this moment. To Maya sleeping soundly, to families finding hope, to a cycle of kindness that would continue long after he was gone. He thought about the note in his pocket. "You're doing great. Keep going." He thought about Michelle's voice. "Give her the life I couldn't give her." He thought about Dorothy Sterling, working 2 jobs, about the construction worker who organized a fundraiser, about Catherine sitting in a diner testing a waiter's character, about every person who had chosen kindness when cruelty would have been easier. The note in his pocket felt warm against his chest. Tomorrow he would call Andre and ask about his art. Tomorrow he would continue building something that mattered. Tomorrow he would wake up and be grateful for the chance to help someone else the way he had been helped. But tonight he just stood there watching his daughter sleep and understood something fundamental. We save each other. That was the only truth that mattered. We save each other, and the saving continues past forward like a flame in the darkness. Never extinguished because someone always remembered to carry it on. Darnell walked to his own bed, the pull-out couch that was still uncomfortable, but no longer felt like punishment. He lay down and closed his eyes and thought about Andre working overnight security, about Tamara helping other mothers, about Jerome teaching younger cooks, about all the people whose lives had intersected with his and changed because someone had chosen to see them. The cycle continued. It would always continue. That was the gift and the burden of kindness. Once you started, you could not stop. Once you saw people as worthy of dignity, you could not unsee it. Once you understood that we were all connected, all responsible for each other, you could not turn away. He fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, about the work that waited, about the families who needed help, about the endless task of building a world where people remembered each other's names. And in the morning, when Maya crawled into bed beside him and pressed her face against his chest and said, "Daddy, I'm proud of you," he knew that everything, all of it, every hard choice and every moment of doubt had been worth it, because this was enough. Not perfect, not complete, but enough. And enough, he had learned, was the only thing that ever really mattered.